Which players will benefit the most from their coaching changes? We'll tell you on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Kate Madjuk is off today. She'll be back on Thursday. But we've got Matt Williamson here. It is a Wednesday show. Follow Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, we've got all the coaching changes. They're all done now. Kellen Moore is officially installed as the Saints head coach. But I want to ask you, from a dynasty perspective, which players do you think gain the most value because of the coaching changes this offseason?
All right, I didn't really focus on coordinator changes. I was just kind of thinking about the head guys. And, you know, you could look at the Saints and be like, okay, they got a pretty good, innovative offensive mind. I just think the status of that team is in such disarray and cap hell that I'm not sure anyone really benefits. But I guess Olave gets a slight tick up, but I don't think he might be catching passes from Rattler all year. I mean, I look at the Browns and the Saints and think they might not win a game this year. Their goal might be to not win a game. The Jets aren't much better. I mean, we don't have any clue what their quarterback situation is going to be. Losing two offensive tackles most likely. Adams is going to leave. Is Wilson going to be back? Cowboys are kind of status quo, as you know. It's not massive changes. I mean, just Dak coming back is great for everyone involved, but
there's nobody else you really want on that offense outside of Dak and CD anyways.
Right. I mean, you're hoping they add O-line or, another receiver or whatever. New England, I'm having a hard time saying, wow, they're going to spike like crazy. I mean, Vrabel's not exactly a throw it around the yard type guy, and I want to see their free agency and draft situation before I invest more in the Pats. So that leaves the Bears and Jags, which definitely stand out in terms of both got a bump. I mean, you start with the quarterbacks, Lawrence and Williams. I'm very optimistic about both. I think Odunze, one of your favorite guys, goes to the top of the list of this conversation quickly because I don't think Keenan Allen's going to be back. And could he have a JSN second year where he passes everybody else on his team as the clear number one? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's crazy at all. And in Jacksonville, Thomas is already, I don't think he's peaked, but he's already sky high.
He's already wide receiver 6 in Dynasty right now. Like he's already at the very top, right?
I don't know. There'll be 2, in any minute now. That's pretty hard to get much higher. But just my hunch is they want to be a physical running game. And we saw enough out of Tank Bigsby that if they reinforce the offensive line, which I think in a Bucs-like manner they will, maybe Bigsby gets a jump. I've never been the biggest ATN fan either.
No, and I think there's a chance that ETN could get traded this offseason. Jags try to, save some cap space. I think it's the quarterbacks, right? If we're talking about which quarterbacks get the biggest bump, it's hard to argue it's not Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence. Now, of those two quarterbacks, I probably like Caleb more, just because I think going from whatever they had last year to Ben Johnson is a bigger upgrade than going from Doug Peterson to Liam Cohen. And I just think Caleb Williams was really good. And going into year 2, I think they're going to do a lot in free agency to address the offensive line. But I think both those guys should get a massive bump in ADP. Trevor Lawrence, Matt, was being drafted as QB 23 going into January.
Terrible.
There's no way now that Liam Cohen's there that he's being drafted outside the top 15 quarterbacks.
No, I would say he, Stroud are 2 of my absolute buy lows, just in maybe not even Dynasty. I don't know exactly where Stroud's at, but like just if they were stocks, I think this is the time to buy Trevor Lawrence, Stroud, that they're better players than the public perception might think right now.
So I want to go to some of the other teams that you mentioned, like the Jets. Yeah. I think there's a chance to buy low on some of these players now, while there's some uncertainty about what things are going to look like when we get to September. But a couple guys I want to just ask you about. Breece Hall, we've seen his ADP drop significantly over the last couple of months. Is he somebody with Aaron Glenn do you think could actually see an increase in value, or are you staying away?
Well, let me ask you a bigger NFL question. What do you think the Jets' plan is? I mentioned the Browns and the Saints. When you really dig into their cap situation and talent base, they're horrible. I mean, I really think both these teams are going to try to be horrible this year. Where the Jets have the Quinnen Williams and Wilson and Hall and Sauce, where the guys that are in their prime, they're probably not going to clean house with all those guys and start over.
I think it's going to be like a reset here a little bit where they're going to try to win, but I think they're going to cut the fat with all the aging veterans.
Yeah.
My guess is they don't draft a quarterback early this year and they try to go with some kind of stopgap option just to get through this year. But I got to believe
like Carr or Fields or somebody like that ends up there. Okay.
Maybe even Russell Wilson if they can get him on a cheap deal, like just something so they can get through this year, continue to evaluate. And I got to believe like in year 2 is when the Jets are going to be aggressive going out and trying to add talent. Would you agree?
I tend to think so. I just wonder if Quinnen Williams looks at Myles Garrett and says, I don't want to be part of that. I'm going to do what Myles Garrett said and get me out of here. We already heard Wilson rumble and not the most stable organization anyway.
That's why
maybe there's a buying opportunity.
Right. And that's where I come back to the Breece Hall thing, because I love Breece Hall coming out of Iowa State. I thought he was a running back that could have easily went in the first round in most drafts.
No question.
In the second round. But since the torn ACL, he just doesn't look like the same athlete. And now he's going into the final year of his contract. And part of me wonders, like, could this be a team that maybe tries to ship off Breece Hall and lean on Braelon Allen and continue to just kind of rack up draft picks to restart? Again, I'm not saying that they should trade Breece Hall, but it wouldn't surprise me either if he's a guy that gets moved for a 3rd round pick here in March.
I kind of like that approach. I mean, if I were the GM of the Jets, I think it's tough to kind of ride the fence, as I mentioned. And if you are going to Carr or Russell Wilson it up, give me all the picks I can for him, as opposed to trading the Garrett Wilsons and Sauces. Lock those guys up, dump the running back, come back in 2 years and draft the running back after you've drafted the quarterback. That timeline makes a lot more sense to me. But I almost interrupted you when you mentioned ATN could get traded. I just don't know what the market's going to be for these running backs, let alone I don't even know what Najee Harris is going to get on the open market with a great incoming class. Who's going to give up picks? Like when you think it's a 3 for Hall, is it really a 4? And then maybe worth it?
The reason I think Breece Hall would go for more is he's younger than ETN.
Yeah.
And
he's more well-rounded too. Yeah.
He's on the last year of his rookie contract, where I believe ETN is playing on the 5th-year option this year, which is like $7 million, which isn't a ton of money, but it's significantly more than what Breece Hall is getting, right? So could ETN be one of these guys that, like, let's use a team that needs a running back, like my Cowboys or yours?
Yeah, I was going to bring it up. You were GM of the Cowboys.
Could you trade a 6th-round pick for Travis Etienne? Basically, Jags are just getting off that contract, and Dallas at least has something now going into draft day weekend, so they don't feel like, hey, it's round 2, all the running backs are gone. We've got to overdraft somebody here.
We have other needs. We'll just punt on running back, go with Rico and Etienne, and that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I meant to mention about the running back thing too is probably maybe even more sense is we know running back injuries are going to happen like crazy. Some of the rookies aren't going to be able to pass protect. They're going to fumble. Yeah. Maybe these are trade deadline guys,
I think so as well. So I'm looking at guys like Tank Bigsby, who's already seen his ADP go way up, Braelon Allen, some of these running backs that are young on these offenses that we think are going to be maybe bad right away. I think those are some of the guys that you should target. I think they're big ADP winners. Let's talk, Matt, about
real quick. Like Breece Hall, it could be trade deadline. The Jets have 1 win, 2 wins, and then he goes to the Chiefs, and we're like, I'm so happy I bought him in February because Marcus told me to.
Well, let's use that Chiefs example. The Chiefs have 2 3rd-round picks, one at the top of the 3rd round, one at the very end of the 3rd round.
Okay,
maybe they feel like, hey, we can't afford to use one of our first 3 picks on a running back. But trading for Breece Hall for pick 100, we'll do that. That'll give us somebody that can help us win right now. That's why I do think if the Jets decide to make that trade, they're going to have plenty of suitors.
I thought they should have traded for Kamara, the Chiefs, back in the last deadline,
Yep. All right, let's talk about Deebo Samuel, who has been requesting a trade. It seems like the 49ers are going to grant that. What kind of dynasty value does he have left? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature. I was loving it during the Super Bowl. Plus, the app is so easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are answering your mailbag questions, and we've got one here from Jake. He wants to know, does Deebo Samuel have any dynasty value left, Matt?
So I urge everyone to listen to the old Peacock and Williamson Tuesday edition, because we kind of, he's a Locked On Niners guy. I'm obviously a Steelers guy, and we start talking Deebo and listed 5 or 6 teams that at least should inquire about him, if not, put an offer in, and one of which was Pittsburgh. And we went through the exercise. If you're the GM of the Niners and I'm the GM of the Steelers, what does it take? Basically came around the conclusion of probably a 5th round pick in that neighborhood. And the beauty of it is, for the team receiving Deebo, extremely cap friendly.
Yes.
That's the beauty of it. So it's a little bit different than like a Cooper Kupp situation. And I bring up Kupp because last Wednesday, I think we had this exact conversation about Kupp. Is he worth anything anymore? Just, is he garbage? I don't know. There are some land. I think he's a number 2 receiver, in the NFL world,
I like Deebo more than Kupp, by the way, just to be clear.
Too.
A lot more.
Me too. I would be more concerned about scheme fit with Deebo and who the coordinator is, although both of them aren't for everybody.
Yeah.
I would pay more for Deebo if I were the Steelers. I would pay more for Deebo if I was a dynasty owner. But both those guys have had such wear and tear on their bodies. I don't think either one is long for this world. But they're both top 36 receivers. I think that's what I said about Kupp. When it comes to week 1 and you got to check a box and get guys in your lineup, they're going to be in almost every fantasy lineup, in my opinion, almost no matter where they land.
Yeah, and especially if Deebo goes to a team that's willing to use him like as a running back, not all game, but give him 4 to 5 running back touches. It's just going to give you a really high floor. Mm-hmm. My concern with Deebo is that the teams that have been mentioned with him are the teams that I just don't think are going to give him enough touches to make him super fantasy relevant. Like, for example, I've heard the Ravens are a team that could be interested. And that makes sense, right? You have Derrick Henry, you have Zay Flowers, Bateman's a nice complementary receiver. You bring Deebo in to give your offense a little bit more physicality. But there's not 10 touches a game. Yeah, there's not 10 touches a game for Deebo in this Baltimore offense. I do think that's an offense that could maximize his skill set, but they hardly have enough targets to go around for the guys they have right now. So
I run 30 routes and get 6 targets. Or
exactly.
Something. Right. Yeah.
I don't see him going to a team that's bad that could give him a bunch of targets, right? Like, is he going to go to Carolina and be the number 1 receiver for Bryce Young? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Deebo's going to want to go somewhere where he can play in a lot of competitive games. And I think that's what makes this really hard for Deebo. I do think he can still be a functional player, but I just don't know if it's going to be a dynasty relevant player.
Here's 2 teams I could throw out there. What if Godwin leaves Tampa and and they kind of push their chips in and think that they're close, we're the best team in the division? Or if the Chargers go another way and don't sign anybody and you put them opposite McConkey. I know it's not a super high volume pass attack, but I can think of worse situations than catch balls from Herbert.
Yeah, and I think Greg Roman's the type of offensive coordinator that would be able to use Deebo in the
and
give him kind of so like that is a good fit. But I do wonder if those teams are looking for more traditional receivers, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if you have Justin Herbert. But I think the landing spot's going to matter a lot here. I don't think he's completely washed, but I think we're getting close, Matt.
Yeah, that we're getting to the end of the tunnel on it. Yeah, I mean, we're on hole 15 out of 18 or something like that. Yeah. Who has more left, Cup or Deebo? I don't think that's an unfair question. We have no clue.
No, I think Cup will stay relevant longer, but I think Deebo's probably the guy that is more likely to finish as like a top 24 receiver, right?
Yes.
Because I could just see Cup being the type of guy that hangs around for the next 4 years as like a number 3, number 4 receiver because he blocks, he catches everything. But I don't think that's all that exciting either.
Right. And then becomes a pseudo wide receivers coach at age 35, you know.
I mean, they're the same draft class, so this is kind of funny, but like I could see Cup kind of just turning into what like Juju Smith-Schuster was for the Chiefs. We're like, hey, big body receiver, catch 2 or 3 passes a game, block your butt off, and that's it.
Yeah, that could be down the not too long away.
No, not too long away. I wanted to ask you just quickly before we move on about Travis Kelce. He, as of February ADP, being drafted as tight end 9, but there's been some rumblings that he might retire. If you have him in your dynasty league, do you just hold on to him? Do you think it's even possible to trade him? What's going on here?
Oh, good question. I really think he retires. I mean, he may not know that answer. Could you imagine what his lifestyle's like? You know, I mean, I mean, he dates the most famous human being on the planet. You know, I mean, like, I can't even imagine what his lifestyle's like. And football might not even be the top 3 things in his life. I mean, he's on every commercial, and I'm sure Patty and Mahomes and these guys want him to come back, but he's not the player he was. I can't imagine him making the decision to go to training camp again and do this all over. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, and he made a good point that, I mean, first of all, he's older than Rob Gronkowski, which is really funny to think about it that way. Like Gronk has been out of the league for how many years now? Kelce turns 36 here in October, but since Mahomes has gotten drafted, they've played in like 20 playoff games. So you're basically talking about a whole extra season that Travis Kelce has on his body. And he said it was a grind this year just to get his body right for the regular season. And he was productive. 97
Swift can't be helpful.
No, I'm sure he can't.
Maybe in the hotel he picks up some dumbbells or something here or there and gets on the treadmill like you or I might. But I mean,
so here's the hard part. So he's caught at least 90 passes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight years.
Okay.
If he comes back, I have a hard time believing that he's not going to catch 85, 90 passes.
Yeah.
So
third downs, red zone.
Right. If you have him now, are you really willing to trade him for a 3rd round rookie pick, a 4th round rookie pick? Are you or are you better off just kind of going down with the ship? If he retires, he retires, but it's just not worth it to trade him for that.
Yeah, I think you just hold him. I mean, Ryan McDowell I used to talk about these guys a lot. Like I remember having these conversations about like Larry Fitzgerald every year. You know, like you can't get anything for them. You've had them on your team for 10 years, or even if it's 1 year, it doesn't matter. You kind of just go down with the ship, and eventually you retire with them in a way. You know, like you got everything you could out of this player, and I mean, if someone's begging to take him off your hands, great.
Like if you get a 2nd round pick for him, sure, do that in a heartbeat.
Right.
But I just don't know, like getting picked 34 in a rookie draft is worth trading Kelce for the fact that maybe he retires and does the Gronk, and then he comes back when we get to August, right? When it's getting closer to football season, and all of a sudden you got a top 6 tight end to get on your roster.
Like, are you trading them for Cole Kmet or Gesicki or somebody like that? I mean,
no, because you can find those guys anywhere, right?
Right. I'm not starting them anyway.
No. Yeah. So I think you just go down with the ship on this one and cross your fingers that he comes back for 1 more year.
Right.
Matt, I want to talk to you about one of the most interesting offensive coordinator hirings for this offseason. Let's talk about Chip Kelly next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there is no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points. He's been red hot in the month of February. And the best part, PrizePicks is so quick and easy to use. You can set up your lineups in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean that I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Download the app or use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Matt, I want to talk to you about Chip Kelly, who is now the offensive coordinator for the Raiders. He was the offensive coordinator for Ohio State this year. They won the national championship there. Chip Kelly has been an interesting coach in the NFL. He had a lot of success with the Eagles right away and then fizzled out. Then he was the 49ers coach for a while. My question for you is, what should we expect for the players on the Raiders offense now? Like if you have Brock Bowers, are you concerned with Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator?
A couple things. First off, I want to get this out of the way that I would expect, sort of in a Harbaugh-like manner, but maybe not as extreme, that a few Buckeyes end up in Vegas, or at least a Buckeye end up in Vegas. Like one of the backs, certainly
Will Howard.
Howard could make all the sense in the world. If Ibuka gets the second round, I mean, maybe, but I would think that there's some familiarity here. Let's bring some Buckeyes to Vegas. I mean, and that would be fine. They all would help that offense, I would think.
Yeah.
Now, what I do know about him is the league really values and respects him. And not just because he got this massive contract, which was the worst kept secret ever, but it certainly matters. Money talks, and they paid him incredibly well. What I don't know is I think he's learned his lesson that it's not going to be Oregon's offense where you run everything as fast as you possibly can. I mean, I think those days are done.
I don't think Pete Carroll wants to play that way either.
Right. I mean, schematically, what are you expecting from him? I mean, I guess is a question I'm going to throw back at you. I mean, I don't have a wonderful feel of run pass percentage, personnel groupings. I don't quite know.
And I don't know, is he going to be the guy that just peppers like Brock Bowers with targets like we saw the Raiders do this year? Here's the thing. I think Chip Kelly is really smart. And I think he's going to figure out a way to use his best weapons. I just don't know what that looks like outside of Bowers. I'm not overly concerned with Bowers because I think everybody knows he's such an elite talent that you have to design your offense around him. But everybody else, I've got no idea. Like, are they going to be looking for like a Justin Fields quarterback prospect that can maybe do more read options and that kind of stuff? Or do they want a traditional pocket passer like Aiden O'Connell or Will Howard?
I think Darnold could be in the mix there.
Yeah. I think Darnold is a really good option there. I do think this is one of the offenses, Matt, that I'm willing to kind of buy a couple different pieces really cheap because I do trust Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly to figure things out and make the Raiders at least competent. And right now, nobody thinks the Raiders are competent. So you can get almost everybody on this roster outside of Bowers at a discount.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd fight you on is maybe you have to wait until after the NFL draft. Like people might be like, that guy landed on the Raiders. That's a terrible landing spot. I don't know that it is. I do think that there is a strong quest here to get to respectability, as you mentioned. I loved how you said that. The GM, Brady involved, the coaching hires are all respectable. They kept the defensive coordinator that did a good job. They've been kind of a laughing stock. Then going back to the last 10 years of Al Davis's life, really, unfortunately, that I think that they're turning the corner and becoming respectable, which is a massive step up. So, yeah, I'm not going to shy away from their dudes. I just think their skill position players could be a lot different other than tight end.
Yeah, and that's
now than opening day.
Right. The guys that I'm looking at, like just to tell you the guys that I'd like to buy are like Trey Tucker, who's basically free right now in your dynasty leagues because they have nobody else in that offense that has any type of speed, right? And I think maybe with more competent quarterback play, and you mentioned Sam Darnold, if they bring in Sam Darnold, that would be the best quarterback that Trey Tucker has ever played with, right? My belief is that they're going to try to sign a quarterback like Darnold, use their first round pick on an offensive lineman. Maybe that's Will Campbell. Really try to beef up that unit. And then in the second, third round is when you're going to see Travion Henderson. Hey, you're our second round pick. Come be our lead back and make this offense more respectable. Again, I just think there are a couple guys, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, maybe even Michael Mayer, if you want to really buy low on him, that could become values here this offseason.
Yeah, I guess my point is you're not going to get a discount on Bowers, as you mentioned.
No.
Maybe a little one on Myers. I don't know. I mean, again, he's not going to win your league for you probably, but he's a good player and you don't mind him on your roster. But I guess my approach is if and when Henderson does end up on the Raiders, I'm like, and people might be like, he was
Don't shy away from it.
Right? Don't shy away. I mean, he was my 5th back. Now I'm making my 7th back. Like, no, I'm going to make him my 4th back,
Yeah. And that's one of the things I do trust Chip Kelly to get this running game fixed. If they've got some good pieces already in the offensive line with the Raiders, Colton Miller, Jackson Powers Johnson, if they add a first-round offensive lineman, I do think this could be a really good landing spot because of that offensive line, because of Chip Kelly. So
would you dislike it if they took like Ted McMillan? And it didn't take O-line?
No, because I don't think their offensive line's bad anyways. It's not like a situation where they have to draft offensive line in round 1 because they already have a franchise left tackle and a franchise center. So they're not they're not like New England right now, where New England might have one starter on their offensive line. But I think McMillan's an interesting player as well. You get Sam Darnold in here with McMillan and Bowers, and all of a sudden, pretty competent offense.
Some kind of rookie running back in the 3rd round, maybe, or whatever. Okay, you're back to respectability.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Matt on Twitter @WilliamsonNFL. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.